Hello there, everyone, and welcome to an all-new episode of Talking Smack, where we talk superheroes, movies, animation, comics, and much, much more. I am your host, Josh Scar, and joining me, as always, is my co-host, Alex. Alex, how are you doing?
I am doing so well, but it's a little difficult to see you at the moment. There's so many cherry blossoms just between us that I'm not sure if it's you or if it's the Winter Soldier. Is it 90s black suit Superman? I can't. Oh, did I mention that there are cherry blossoms around us?
So many cherry blossoms.
I know. How are you, sir?
I'm doing all right. Had a pretty good day. Saw Captain America today. Wearing my Captain America sweater, drinking out of my Captain America mug. I came ready for battle today.
You have a Captain America shield behind you as well.
I do have, I mean, that's a constant decoration, but yeah, with the way the reviews have gone for this movie, and we haven't really, it's a really rare occasion where we don't at least share a few ideas here and there about what we're going to talk about with the movie. In this case, we have barely said anything. Like, you had one thing that you noted, which I don't even remember what it was. And then I made a comment about another thing, and it's not necessarily directly related to the movie, but it's in the movie. But first and foremost, I do need to say that I was on the Cultworthy. I was part of Antonio's Valentine's Day episode. He and I discussed the movie About Time, and he really enjoyed it. And I love the fact that he enjoyed it, because he is currently not enjoying the movie that he is having to watch for Back to the Balcony. I'm not going to spoil which one it is, because I don't want to creep in on their territory, but seeing the chats between him and Justin has been fun. So keep an eye out for a very salty Antonio for an upcoming Back to the Balcony.
About Time is one of those movies. If you just read the premise on the back of the box, it could be so interpreted incorrectly about the intention of the film, which is a person can go back in time to revisit previous mistakes, or to even just revisit cherished moments, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it is done with such earnestness and such sweetness that I love it. And I actually rewatched it because you were on the Cultworthy. So I was like, oh, I haven't seen that in a few years. I forgot this cast was stacked. Outside of,
there's a lot of people who go on to become someone. There's already Tom Hollander, who everyone knows. From if nothing else, the Pirates of the Caribbean sequels. Yep. Then you've got Donald Gleason, who is one of the Weasley guys, but he's gone on to have his own little career in his own right. But Vanessa Kirby's in there, which I didn't even recognize her. She is so young and funny, and it only reaffirmed how much I'm really anticipating her Sue Storm.
Oh, yeah. You have Margot Robbie in there for a little while as well, which I believe is using more of her Australian accent versus the kind of bland American one that she has been using lately.
She's just using her Australian accent to supplement as some kind of regional dialect of a British accent.
Bill Nighy is such a damn treasure in that film. There's a part towards the end where, because of the mechanics of how time travel works, you can't indefinitely be traveling. While it's a romance story, it also is this beautiful father and son story. And I know they use a younger actor for that scene because they're on the beach running together.
Yeah.
But it is so beautiful, and you so sell it in that moment that it's just there are so many beautiful heartstrings in that film. And I'm glad that Antonio liked it, and he didn't let his cynicism hit him and be like,
his love of the macabre. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's a beautiful movie.
It was a good discussion. And also shout out to the Luke at the Howdy Beans podcast. He did an About Time episode for Valentine's Day as well. Really lovely episode. So I just wanted to shout that out as well, just because there was no ill will between me and Antonio and Luke. We obviously didn't even know he was planning on doing an episode about Time, but his episode is very different from the one Antonio and I did. But just a lovely episode, and he just gets really deep into how the movie affects him as well. Antonio and I get into that a little bit, especially with both of us having lost our fathers in the last several years after the movie came out, and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, Luke just had a really good conversation about it too, and he flies solo on his podcast, so like it's a different talent to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And speaking of different talents and flying solo, last week when I flew solo to do the Superb Owl trailers, I misspoke and said that the bad guy in Thunderbolts asterisk is Hyperion. It is the Sentry / the Void. So Alex, I have a quick little assignment for you. I want you to open up 2 tabs in Google or whatever browser you use. Type in Marvel Comics Hyperion. And then on the other tab, type in Marvel Comics, The Sentry, and tell me which one, how you can differentiate the two.
All right. I have done what you asked. The images are a blonde person in a suit that is yellow. The other one is a blonde person in a suit that is yellow. One of them doesn't have a giant S on it. Other than that, big yellow cape, blonde hair, muscular build, way too tight of an outfit with a prominent bulge. This must be a 90s introduction into who this person is.
I think both of them are relatively close to the 90s as far as introductions. They are Superman type characters. So I believe Hyperion is a guy who is very much just like a Superman character in like the most strict sense of the term, but he can be a good guy or a bad guy. But the Sentry, he's a little more interesting because, and this is probably why they're using him in the Thunderbolts, is because he has a split personality tied to his superpower, where when he's the Sentry, he's a superhero. He's a Superman, but his nemesis is the Void, and they're both Bob. In this case, Robert. I think he's like Robert Reynolds is the character's name. He was a bad kid who took a super soldier serum, and it created this split personality where he wanted to be a hero, but like his true self is a bad guy. So it like created this divergence within him. And so anytime the Sentry did something good, the Void did something evil, and ne'er the two shall meet because obviously they're the same person. So it's an interesting thing. So like when we're seeing like all those people get sucked into like the shadow things and Yelena's walking into that big void, it's because the Void is the bad guy. They're just marketing him as like the Sentry right now. But I just wanted to clarify because I did get a couple of angry people being like, "You're a fake nerd, blah, blah, blah. It's not Hyperion, you dumbass." So I needed to rectify that one.
So I cannot take, my apologies to Louis Pullman, I cannot take him seriously in that role. I'm hoping that it is sold through the performance that he's the big bad, kind of an evil Superman kind of thing. But he was in Top Gun Maverick as this dude named Bob. His actual name is Bob, so he did not actually have like a nickname or, like Maverick and Fanboy and Hangman and all them. His name was Bob. It's like, oh, cool. So what's your actual name? It's also Bob. And he's like, does Bob stand for something? He's like, no. He's geeky, kind of like the reserved one. There's this his introduction is great because all the cadets that are being taught are showing up at this bar to like, shoot the shit with each other. And then one of them's like, yeah, we're waiting on like whatever his name is. And he's like, I'm actually here. And the camera pans and they're like, when did you get here? He's like, actually, I was here the whole time. You guys weren't just talking to me. So when he comes out in the hospital gown in the trailer, he's like, my name's Bob. I'm like, holy crap. Bob got promoted. And he's, it's some of the same mannerisms, the whole, the whole shy awkwardness. So I'm hoping that Sentry,
he's really stretching his acting chops with that one.
Yeah, I'm hoping he sells it because I laugh every time when he's like, I've been here the whole time.
It's a good gag if you can get someone plain enough to sell it.
Did you get the new Thunderbolts trailer in before your viewing of this movie? Because the trailer I got was not the one that they released on the Super Bowl.
I got the one that released with the Super Bowl.
Interesting, because the one that was released this week with the Super Bowl had a shot of Sentry like with the cape flowing in the air.
Yeah, you get a really quick shot of him, but he's like silhouetted against the backlight or something. The gray, it's like the gray with the black character.
Yes.
Silhouetted black character, and then like the gray buildings around him.
Yeah, the trailer that I got was slightly longer at almost 3 minutes, but it didn't include that shot. It included a little more of like the bonding and and seemingly that Bucky is like recruiting everybody kind of thing. And it also was vaguely awkward. Oh yeah. It included a few more shots of Ghost using her powers. Yeah.
Maybe you got a fancy trailer because you went to the fancy theater with the seats.
I did. Those were nice leather reclining seats, and only 3 trailers, which is so nice.
That must have, I think I got 9. Let me pull up my app real quick. We had so many damn trailers.
We got the trailer for Rami Malek going on a murder spree because his wife got killed.
Yeah, Rachel Brosnahan's his wife, but we're not going to advertise that because we don't know that she's a star yet.
Correct. Also, we hired her for this role on the cheap, and now we're killing her off. Oops.
We're going to fridge her because that's where Hollywood's going back to for some reason.
Yeah. I got that one. Got the Thunderbolts, and there was a third one. It didn't stick enough in my head for me to actually care, unfortunately.
Would it have been Fantastic Four?
Oh my God, you're right. It was Fantastic Four, but because it was the same trailer that they released a week
that
before the Super Bowl.
So many times already.
Yeah, which by the way, God, I hope that movie's good. It looks so fun, and it seems so great. Everybody just seems to be on fire. Ha ha. With their performances.
Like me saying fantastic several times last week.
Exactly.
But before we dive into Captain America Brave New World, we need to hear from our buddy Caesar over at the No on 15 Allcast. We'll be right back.
No, I'm 15. No, I'm 15. No, I'm 15. No, I'm 15.
So, what's our show about? It's about some dudes talking about movies, just like this.
With Goofy screaming with them.
So you're talking that they should have replaced it like with a Tom and Jerry scream or something like that?
Or you might hear something like this.
Oh my gosh.
That whole movie, waiting to see what happens with Blanca, is like the most aggravating thing in that film. But for the most part, we talk movies from the 80s, 90s, and today. And if you grace us with your ear time, you might hear one of these 30-second gems like this.
Yeah, I was gonna say I did not get a chance to watch this one this week.
Give it to him anyways.
We're gonna give it to you, Brett, anyway. You ready?
I'm gonna give you the 30-second review of Tron Uprising.
All right. Start the clock, and then. So give us a shot and listen to the No on 15 Allcast wherever you listen to your podcasts.
No, I'm 15.
And we're back. We're here to talk Captain America Brave New World, which I have suited up for. I have my Sam Wilson Captain America sweater on. I've got my Captain America mug. Obviously, the shield is behind me as always. And I am ready to defend this movie from Alex if he did not like it. Before we go into all that, we don't have the official box office numbers yet, but projections show that it took in about $40 million between Thursday previews and Friday shows. And then the 3-day weekend is projected at around $87 million. And the 4-day weekend with President's Day is projected somewhere between 95 and 109 million. I believe that's domestic. And that's not a terrible turnout for a movie that I think is probably 3 years overdue, plus all of the production problems it had, which we'll get into. I think, it's not going to make its money back, but I think a $90 to $100 million opening for this movie is not bad. The problem is going to be it's not going to make any more money after that.
Josh, I have a question for you about this film. Did you notice in particular who Isaiah actually is? Isaiah Bradley.
He's Carl Lumbly, the Mantis.
Yes. But did you know that one, bless this man for carrying the emotional weight of this film on his back?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Just like Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Like I said it to Ricky after we got out of the show. I was like, God damn, Carl Lumbly. He could kick my ass with a flick of his finger, but I'm still like, I'll take care of you, Isaiah. I love you. Don't cry.
So I didn't realize who he was. I looked back at his filmography because this was a very unexpected emotional performance from him. The way he interacts with Sam, they acknowledge the baggage that came with Falcon and the Winter Soldier with acknowledging his character and carry that forward, which I love. I love that the reason why Falcon can actually hold his own is because he spars with Captain America.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, I love it. And he like whoops his, and he's slow and Falcon's fast, and that's to be expected. But that's how he trains. But I look back at his filmography, like where did this emotional performance come from? And I didn't realize that he was in 2 of my favorite films growing up. He was in Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension. But he's also in Coming to America. He is the janitor that throws himself at the feet of Joaquin and praises him at the basketball game.
Interesting.
Yes. He's like, he's like, what did you do that, man? Oh, he's just somebody I met in the bathroom. That whole thing. But he's that guy.
Wow.
Like,
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. That's like one of his like first, like those, let me see. Coming to America is his 6th kind of like film. I mean, credited, not big roles, starring roles. Right. But the Buckaroo Banzai is his 4th one. And Caveman, the 1981 legendary Ringo Starr, Dennis Quaid, Shelley Long movie, was his 2nd film he ever did. It's a bad movie, but it is a wonderful 80s movie.
Yeah, sounds about right. I mean, that's kind of where we're at right now, where we're in a bunch of bad movies, but none of them are going to really be considered good movies, even like good for the time.
Right.
But yeah, Carl Lumbly is a guy that I have all the love in the world for. As I've mentioned 100 times before, my dad and I would always go to the movies, but we used to watch like TV all the time together too, as like a family. And my family would watch The Adventures of Lois and Superman, or Superman and Lois, whatever it was, with the Superman that we don't acknowledge anymore, and Terry Hatcher. And like that was one of the few shows where like we sat down as a family and watched. And then I have like the most vivid memory of when we moved to the Rockford area. I was in 3rd grade. We moved on a Friday, and that's when Mantis was on. And my dad made sure that the cable was hooked up, that the TV was plugged in, and we were able to get in front of that TV by like 7 or 8 o'clock Friday night to watch Mantis together. I don't remember anything about the show other than it's about a guy who is paralyzed. He wears a mask that makes him look like a mantis, and then he gets like superhuman strength and he can run around and walk. Apparently season 2 got super crazy where they like ended up like traveling to the past and dealing with dinosaurs. I haven't seen anything beyond that point. I really wish it would show up somewhere so I could see how crazy it got. I might even do a watch along podcast if that ever happened.
Oh, if it does, I'm in.
But yeah, Carl Lumbly's a guy that, especially like with his reappearance in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, he just was fantastic in that, and what he did in this role as well. Like you said, he is the emotional weight bearing of this movie. Like everything that is being done in this movie is mostly because of him and because of his performance. You're like, get Isaiah out of there.
Mm-hmm. I have to agree that Harrison Ford actually gave a shit, which I have loved. I don't know if maybe it's Jason Segel having a good effect on him with Shrink. Well, I mean, Shrinking,
yeah.
But he seems to actually be enjoying himself. He seems to be trying and emoting, versus for a long time we just got the like, okay, what's the next role? Okay, so I'm president. Okay, so some one-armed man killed my wife. Okay, and especially his returns in like Blade Runner and Indiana Jones, he just seemed to kind of be there for a paycheck. But this one, he was in a lot of the movie. There are numerous solo scenes of him doing his own thing and allowed to like be charismatic. And so I have to praise him for that. If there's one thing I cannot praise, do we know if that's the same actor from the Incredible Hulk or Hulk? The leader, what's his name? They said his name like 6
Tim
times.
Blake Nelson.
Yes.
Samuel Stearns. Yes. That he was on set. They obviously very heavily CGI'd like the makeup they put him in.
Okay.
But yeah, it's Tim Blake Nelson. The only thing that I could see that would be a problem with, we should say full on spoilers for this movie.
Right.
Everything you see in the trailers is like the beginning of the movie or the end of the movie. The actual movie that happens in the middle is not in the trailers. So like there's a whole lot of stuff we need to talk about. So spoilers up top. But like the big villain of the movie is the leader, Tim Blake Nelson, finally coming back after his appearance and origin story being revealed in The Incredible Hulk from 2008. I think
Stearns, they call him Stearns repeatedly.
Samuel
That's what
Stearns,
it is.
yeah.
Okay. All right.
Before we get into like the actual substance of it, I have to make my comment that I sent to you and Justin, which is like the only thing I said about the movie when I came out. Did no one at Marvel watch Madam Web? Because Tim Blake Nelson's voice that he uses as Samuel Stearns as the leader in this movie is the exact same as "They will not take away what I have built."
Yeah, it is the same voice. That's why I was confused, because the makeup, Tim Blake Nelson does have a very distinctive face.
And he also has a very distinctive voice. Like he has a very
Correct.
Southern kind of charm to him. Like anyone who has seen The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, like that's kind of who he is. Or "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" Like that's all kind of who he is. He can kind of put the drawl away a little bit, like he does in The Incredible Hulk, but it's still there.
Because the end of The Incredible Hulk, he gets some of Hulk's blood like dripped on him or whatever, and his head starts to pulsate and looks really gross, and they kind of cut away. And then it's like 17 years later, they reintroduce this character, and they do have which poor Giancarlo Esposito, poor him having to do a monologue to explain who the hell this guy is.
Yeah, they do it twice.
Yes, and why he looks so bizarre. But I was just looking at it going, is it the same actor? I mean, they could have pulled a Red Skull and just hired a look-alike, sound-alike. But it is, okay, so it is the same actor. But I was just like, why would you bring him back to have a very odd-sounding voice? And then they like green out one eye, and they put, I'm going to say 32 ounces of like linguine on his head and painted green and called it a day. And then because half the time he's walking around in a hoodie.
Well, I mean, you don't want to put him in makeup all the time,
Right.
especially when you're doing so many reshoots for this movie. I dug the look. I kind of like the idea of it being a grotesque thing instead of just him having especially after the MODOK fiasco, which maybe that's part of where some of these reshoots happened.
Oh my gosh,
like you don't want to just have a guy with like a tall, flat top head. Like that's the leader in the comics, is he's just got a big skyscraper style head that's flat on top, and he's got a receding hairline and everything, and like very comic booky, but it's not going to translate into a movie. So make it gross and make it like it's almost tragic in a way, but he's also still the bad guy. So it's one of those things where I think it's a good deviation from the source material, because it adds an extra layer to what has happened to him, especially when they add in the fact that like in The Incredible Hulk, we see his head start to pulsate. And as comic book fans and people who have been anticipating his return eventually, we finally see him and we think like, oh, what's he going to look like? What's going to happen? And we find out that Ross has like just shot him full of gamma to make his head this thing that he is now. It wasn't just an immediate like, oh, the Hulk blood did this to me. It gave him a reason to not be vindictive against the Hulk, but instead against Ross, which to your point, I agree. I think Harrison Ford did turn in a good performance. I still don't like the fact that they cast 80-year-old Harrison Ford to try and come back for maybe 2 more movies in Avengers and Doomsday and Secret Wars. Yeah. But there's a big ripple effect that we're going to talk about here once we get past like discussing this film. But the first probably 45 minutes of this movie, like once we get through the Isaiah setup, I really dug. I thought it was like really good, really intriguing. Like it's very Winter Soldier, Manchurian Candidate kind of stuff. But I think everyone is turning in good performances, and for the most part, I think part of what really sells it is that a lot of it is indoors and on sets. And once we get past what point is it? Once we get past the very overt Winter Soldier sequence where they meet Stearns for the first time, it's almost a 1-to-1, like Steve and Natasha go and find the underground bunker, and they find oh god, what the hell's his name?
Evil Nazi
Zola, Dr. Zola. They find Zola's face in the TV. It's almost a 1-to-1 scene, but in this case it's Sam and oh god,
I know his name is Danny Ramirez. His actual name, but
character name is
Joaquin Torres.
Thank you. I wouldn't have got there. I want to tell myself I would, but I don't think I would have. Joaquin Torres is not a character from the comics that I really care too much about, because in the comics, Joaquin's character is infused with Falcon blood and like hit with gamma radiation. So he's like a weird Falcon human hybrid, and he steals Red Wing from Sam, which in the comics, Red Wing is an actual Falcon that Sam can telecommunicate with. Comics are weird but fun. So like I've never really cared for Joaquin Torres as like a comic book character, because I don't care for like that body horror shit. So like the fact that they translated him into just being another Air Force guy that takes on the Falcon mantle, I like that a lot more. But once we get past that sequence where the leader, Tim Blake Nelson, Samuel Stearns, he's gonna be all three in my head. Once he like lays out his plan and like reveals his master plan to Sam, like that's kind of where there's a significant drop off in quality and storytelling, and it just kind of becomes standard superhero fare. But before we dive any deeper into it, I just want to say up top, I don't think any of it is like the worst thing I've ever seen. It's not Thor: Love and Thunder. It's not really disappointing. It's not just cringe, overly done comedy. No. I think part of where the quality drops is in the visual effects and the fact that they end up just kind of monologuing the rest of the way through. They don't care too much more about the story because they've already revealed the bad guy. They've already revealed the plot. The only thing that's still remaining is the thing they teased in the trailers, which is building towards the Red Hulk reveal. So like, that's the only thing that's still happening at that point in the movie. And there's still like an hour to go from that point on.
I don't think it was that bad of a movie. There are specific moments where you can tell that this is not necessarily reshot, but that this was in a different location completely, especially when you get to the third act.
The end especially.
Yeah, the parts that really stood out to me about how bad the visual effects were, and that people were giving like different takes, or they were just shooting lines and then they were just transposed and dropped in, is there is a meeting at the end where Stearns, the leader, big head, basically he pulls a Joker to turn himself in to Sam, and they're talking to each other, but they're never in frame together. And both of their backgrounds are incredibly blurry, and there's some courtyard. And then this is the part that stuck out the worst to me. I'm like, they did not shoot this together. Is when Sam walks by him for the guards to take him. Stearns stands stock still, and the camera angle is on Sam as he walks past him. And there's no reaction of like the shoulder brush or anything. And then the next scene of the leader is he's being pushed to the ground and handcuffed, and you see his face again. I'm like, that's a body double. They're not in frame together. They didn't film this together. And then at the entire last sequence with the Red Hulk, with the cherry blossoms and at the White House, you're getting like individual actors with blurry backgrounds of like, okay, we cut this and move this here, and now we move this here. The reason why I notice it so much is it's a very standard way for Marvel to do their rushed effects. Most famously, it is done during Thor Ragnarok, where he and Loki are talking to Odin.
Oh yeah, they're on that shoreline in Norway.
Right. And originally that was actually shot like in an alleyway in New York City. Mm-hmm. And that's why like they don't move beyond these like really tight confines as they're talking, because he was like apparently in a trash can or something talking to them. Mm-hmm. And then from behind them, like turns a corner, is where Helga shows up. And that's why that entire sequence, there's like no movement. There's no like positioning of like, we're going to get in a fight or anything. It's just because they originally filmed it. Oh yeah, this is a hallway scene. Oh, okay, we got to move this. And now everything's in Norway, you know?
And that's why Thor in that sequence also just like rushes Hela, and why like he doesn't do anything different with Mjolnir or anything, because it's a tight alleyway, so there's only one way to take her on.
I think what we got is a movie that the action sequences were locked. The plot, however, was not. That being said, I had fun with what was presented to me. I think Anthony Mackie gave it his all in his scene. Not only are you dealing with somebody with his emotional core is wanting to protect Isaiah, but also he is not Winter Soldier. He is the Captain America that now has the weight not only of being an unpowered an unpowered human, but he also has this racial weight. And they don't talk. They don't be like, well, it's because I'm black, isn't it? Or something like that, right? They go for that. He just talks about like, where I grew up, people weren't like me. And I think what sold me on the journey, one is Isaiah Bradley, Carl Lumbly is fantastic. Beautiful scenes. I was heartbroken when they arrest him and he's saying, please don't rip my suit, because it was a suit he got married with his wife in and she had passed. And it's his only good suit. And they're like dragging him to the ground and then they're yanking him up by the suit. And he's like, don't tear my suit. Don't, you know, I was like, holy shit. This is a man who is broken, who lives in not a great part of town, who's been locked away forever. And now he did something under mind control. And I think they purposely had the cops be 3 white cops who lifted him up and who were doing that stuff. 2 guys and I believe a woman. And all he can do is say, please don't tear my suit. That hurts. And that is, and then there's a scene at the end with Joaquin Torres where he's talking about how he wanted to be like Falcon. And they both don't say it's because they grew up in like, you know, bad parts of town or they grew up as minorities. They're just talking about the weight of what they have and what they want to see. Those moments are beautiful. And they're such good moments for this movie. The plot is complete garbage, but the movie has weight in those moments. And that is where
he's out of line, but he's right.
Thank you. Thank you, Sam. So yeah, I don't think it's the worst thing ever. I will rewatch this movie more than I will probably never watch Guardians of the Galaxy 3 again. I'll never rewatch Love and Thunder again. I have no interest in it. I will rewatch this movie because those little emotional weights of the juxtaposition of Steve's journey versus Sam's journey, and especially the emotional weight of Isaiah, is just so worth watching. And the explosions were kind of fun.
Yeah, I think there's weird ramifications that happen in this movie because the main driving force for all of the external Sam Wilson stuff is that Celestial Island has been from the Eternals has been like mined and reviewed and like analyzed. That's the word I'm looking for. They found out that it's made of not vibranium, adamantium. And now they're like trying to create like a treaty so that everyone gets an equal share of this vibranium or adamantium. And good concept, but like Stearns has done his thing to throw wrenches into the plan to frame Ross and eventually out him as the Red Hulk, which is something it seems he's not even aware he's been doing or he's able to do. But in the ripple effect of the MCU, there are 4 movies to go, 5 maybe. We've got Thunderbolts, Fantastic Four, Avengers Doomsday, supposedly a Spider-Man movie coming out July 2026, and then Secret Wars in May 2027. So there's 5 movies to go. So is adamantium just being thrown in here as a MacGuffin is something we are aware of? Because you're not going to deal with adamantium in Avengers Doomsday. That's got to be a multiverse thing where you have the Fantastic Four and Robert Downey Jr.'s Doom collide in an incursion with the MCU. Secret Wars is probably going to be some form of the 2015 Battle World sequence. Thunderbolts, I don't even know really what they're going to be building towards after this movie because the MCU is just kind of weirdly treading water to build towards Doomsday. Like, this movie is the proper lead into Avengers Doomsday. But if this was the 3rd or 4th movie post Endgame, I think it's a bigger hit than it is just because of what it's building towards. Because the post credit scene, which is also very obviously shot in a reshoot, like Sam Mackie looks Anthony Mackie looks completely different, or like very obviously not filmed in the same sequence of events as this film, most of the film. And then Stearns is standing there also, again, very clearly like this is a little different because he doesn't have the same performance, the same cadence in anything he's saying. Like he clearly lost a little bit of what he was doing, which I think is for the better in the post credits. Stearns says, oh, you're great at fighting the bad guys, whatever, but what are you going to do when you fight the others? And it's like, ooh, who are the others? If this was 2021, 2022, and we're like, who are the others? Is it the mutants? Are the mutants coming? Is it the incursions? Because the incursions have been teased in the Multiverse of Madness. What is this? Like, there's intrigue built in there. But now we know where it's going because we have one other movie before we dive into the prelude to Doomsday, which is Fantastic Four: First Steps.
If this movie came out before Quantumania, the obvious answer is Kang, the other Kangs.
Mm-hmm.
But they're dumping Kang. I mean, rightly so. It wasn't working. And, personal issues aside, it's obviously Kang's. Fine, cool. My issue with that scene is, so the basic premise of the movie is, as Josh said, it is about the world. It wants the Celestials they do this big build up that Japan is the first ones to be able to figure out how basically to harvest and properly dilute pure adamantium from this. And they even hype it up that it is better than vibranium. It can be used for medicine and clothing and defense and long health.
And we have access to it.
Right. But we all need to be in peace for this to happen. Okay, cool. That's fine. And it turns out that the leader, whatever his name is, Samuel Stearns, he has been quietly imprisoned by Ross for the last 17 years and has been used to basically determine probabilities to put Ross in the White House. It also turns out that Ross is stupid enough to not realize that he shouldn't be taking medicine created by this dude because it builds up enough gamma in his bloodstream that eventually he's going to Hulk out.
Well, to the movie's credit, I will say they say pretty blatantly that the agreement was he would create something that would allow his heart to continue, because we do get the backstory in I think it's Infinity War, where he's talking about like, oh, my heart gave out in the back 9 and I had a heart attack. And at that point is when he went to Stearns and said, hey, solve this problem for me, because they say my heart's going to give out and I'm going to die. Get me to the White House. Once I get to the White House, I will pardon you, and that'll be it. And then the movie says that at a certain point, Stearns like upped the dosage to the gamma radiation because he realized that he wasn't actually going to be let out.
Right. And part of that I can kind of forgive, because he does have a very emotional speech he gives to Sam, talking about how ever since he decided to basically commit his life to hunting down Banner, and then the Sokovia Accords bullcrap. So he spent his life trying to hunt down Avengers and imprisoning Sam and Ant-Man and all the others. Betty, his daughter, Liv Taylor, doesn't talk to him anymore. Hasn't talked to him in like 10 years. And so he wants to eventually just go on a walk with her and look at cherry blossoms and stuff. So I can kind of understand that. That's the basic premise of the movie. Is Stern is doing probability to create havoc in the world by destroying Ross's attempt to create this peace accord to use adamantium for the world's benefit. And when he realizes he won't get pardoned, he needs to make him Hulk out. That's the story. It's very simple. They explain it like 5 different times, which is really, really frustrating that they literally are spending so much time. They do like, first off, they start off with a recap of, do you remember the Incredible Hulk? Cool. Do you remember the Eternals? No? That's fine. Keep going, everybody.
Just remember that there's a giant person sticking out of the middle of the ocean in some part of the world.
Right. So that is when things don't really work. And things, we've been talking about this for 20 minutes or so. Neither of us have mentioned, other than my offhand remark, Giancarlo Esposito, who's hyped as the main bad guy of this film, is dealt with in 2 minutes.
Well, if I remember correctly, I think Giancarlo Esposito said that he was originally in the first shoot and run of the film, he was killed in the opening sequence. He was more or less treated like Batroc the Leaper in Winter Soldier. He was just a really quick one-off villain because they wanted to do a Captain America villain callback, as Cap deals with the Serpent Society fairly regularly in the comics.
Yeah.
And through the process of reshoots, they brought him back because it's Giancarlo Esposito. You're going to probably want to use him again. So if they come back and they tease that he's going to come back after Sam as Captain America after he breaks out of prison. And I think if anything, I was a little frustrated that the first time we see him, we see a little bit of Gus Fring in him. You get the accent, you get the cadence. It sounds like Gus Fring from Breaking Bad. And then the minute he starts speaking English, it's just Giancarlo Esposito just being a very eloquent person. And I'm like, those two are not the same. Like, you're giving me a little bit of tonal whiplash here.
Yeah, I was really, really hoping at some point out of nowhere they would make an in joke with him where he like throws a green big-eared like toy like just throws it at Sam just as a joke to continue the punishment of Baby Yoda. But he sells it. There's the scenes where they're together, and I'll say the action scenes, other than the obvious really bad CGI ones, they really work. You get to see Sam put in the work, and why his fighting style is not meat and potatoes like Steve's is. He has to constantly be flipping himself around and hiding. I love the use of the vibranium shields, the wings as shields, getting that like energy charge from them, and he used that a few times to release that. I really dig his relationship with Torres and kind of mentoring to him to take over the Falcon suit. And there is so much good in this movie. I just don't understand how they couldn't discover a through line plot that really made you care. That's the part that just really bothered me.
I think part of the problem is they just rested on their laurels. Like, this is pretty clearly a Hulk movie that they just converted into a Captain America movie. You have two Hulk villains. You have someone becoming a Hulk at the end of the movie for the big punch up. And like, I wouldn't be shocked if the script was Banner and Sam Wilson either as Falcon or Captain America. Like, it's fairly interchangeable. But because I don't think they probably legally could get away with having Banner in this movie as the sidekick, I don't think they could bring him in. So they just went, all right, well, let's just put Joaquin Torres in there. We'll have two flying guys. And maybe that was the thing, because this movie does lean very heavily into the Falcon, or not, to Captain America, the Winter Soldier. There are very obvious parallels and things where they went, okay, let's do this part. Let's do that part. Let's do this part. And for the most part, I think it's fine. I do think it comes across a little lazy when thinking about it after the fact, but in terms of what we got and some of the things we were hearing behind the scenes, it's a remarkably coherent movie that I think hits the marks that it's trying to hit. It just, there's not a lot of depth because partly you give away the Red Hulk reveal, and also because we've seen so much of this kind of thing before where every Marvel movie that comes out now is like, oh, this is the best one since the Winter Soldier. And this is like, oh, we're so inspired by the Winter Soldier or this or that. Cause they did the same thing. It went with the Falcon and the Winter Soldier is like, oh, or no, what was it? It was Secret Invasion, where they're like, oh, this is like the most espionage thing we've done since the Winter Soldier. It's like, no, this isn't.
My main issue with the villain's plot is they try to do two things and neither of them work. One is they talk about how he's really good at statistics and probability and stuff. Okay, well, if he is that good, and he mentions once or twice that Sam surprised him, he says something along the lines, if there's an 89% chance you went back, so yeah, you turned around, but instead you came here. That was odd. But then he immediately has a way to neutralize Sam with like concussive like sound blasting coming down. He's like, you're so boring. I knew you would do that. Okay, where are your other plans? Like, where we don't get any scenes of him trying to recalculate in the moment to do these probabilities, which is a failure because oddly enough, Deadpool 2 does that really well with the luck, which with Domino and her luck. With the like, that doesn't work. Like, luck's not cinematic. How can luck be cinematic? And they focus on how she just lucked into things and things went her way. They could have done something similar to that. The other thing that bothered me about his quote unquote power is of mind control is all I kept seeing was Incredibles 2 and the Mind Slaver, because it was flashing lights on screens and then like a sound, and that tripped you into going into your mind control. And I was like, the Incredibles did this better.
I will say that the trigger for the mind control, I really enjoyed that callback because it's the song Mr. Blue, which for the uninitiated, in the Incredible Hulk, Bruce Banner is in constant contact or in regular contact with someone. He identifies himself, Bruce does, as Mr. Green, and he's in contact with Mr. Blue.
Mr. Blue.
And Mr. Blue is Samuel Stearns, who eventually becomes the leader and is the villain of this movie. So I appreciated that callback that like even he's holding on to. I think this movie is just not that deep is part of the problem. And I think part of what is also missing from this is nothing that Sam does really feels like it's Captain America. Like he got into hot water for saying something that is very obviously like, I understand Captain America, which is he really should be called Captain Good. The only reason he's Captain America is because he is an American creation and he was created in wartime. And so like now it's a title that is handed down because they're Americans. But like the idea of Captain America is not that he symbolizes the government or the politicians that run the country. He is the embodiment of what we think American ideals truly are. And that's ever evolving. That is something that is knowing the difference between right and wrong, whether or not that is in agreement or disagreement with the governing body that you are supposed to be representing. And there's never really a moment where Sam is faced with that. I'm going to go against my government's wishes and do the right thing. Like that's the emotional core of Civil War, is that Steve, who has been a good soldier his entire life, and like even in the Winter Soldier, he goes rogue because the government has been corrupted and been infiltrated from the inside. And then in Civil War, he's being asked to sign these accords, which like part of him is kind of in agreement with, especially as someone who is a soldier who's like, okay, I'll do what the government tells me to do. But once he realizes the ramifications of it, and like they even say the line almost perfectly from Civil War in this, where Sam asks Ross, what if we have a disagreement? What happens then? And Ross kind of rubs it away as like, we'll talk about it when the time comes, which like, okay, well, you're already passing the buck and treading water on useless arguments when, maybe you need to act. So I think that kind of moment is missing, because even though Ross tells Sam, like, just drop it, don't get involved in this, Sam does. It's never like, oh, Captain America's on the run from the government. Captain America is doing this against government wishes. It's more a personal vendetta or a personal matter for Ross that Sam not be involved in. Sam's obviously invested because Isaiah's life is on the line. And that's where the disconnect kind of happens, where it's never Sam is recognized as he's like recognized as Captain America now, but he's not like a government institution like John Walker's Captain America was. And there's just something missing where Sam really didn't get a moment to be like, this is the right thing to do, and you're not doing it, so I'm going to point it out to you.
Right. It's a lack of, in some ways, consequence, because when he decides to go off and try to find out what is this secret, what is going on, who was pulling the strings, which really bothered me, that the strings were revealed like almost immediately. There are no real consequences to his actions. Like at one point, the feds show up to arrest him, but immediately are mind controlled and he escapes. So there's really no consequence therein. And something that bothered me a little bit, to go back to the whole representation of what Captain America is, this is just a personal thing. I don't need to see the flippin' White House destroyed. Okay, I get it. We've had a bunch of like 90-year-old men as our leaders for the past 12 years. I don't need to see the White House destroyed as a metaphor for the downfall of American politics. And frankly, no offense, any Secret Service agent that immediately sees the president get angry and shoots him is not going to be employed.
That was a really weird moment where it's
wasn't
like,
it?
Yeah, he's a Hulk, but they're shooting at him. I feel like that's a conflict of interest where,
and the gunships arrive within seconds to kill the president.
yeah, that was weird.
That super bothered me. I mean, I kind of didn't mind him taking down ripping off the American flag from top of the White House and throwing it through a helicopter. I mean, that's
using it as a spear or a javelin. Yeah, that was I mean, that was kind of cool.
But I don't need to see that. So that is my main crux of this, is that I didn't feel an emotional connection. Now, I do have 2 questions for you about cast members. Did you notice Rosa Salazar at all in this film?
I don't even know who Rosa Salazar is.
Alita Battle Angel?
Okay. Let me try to figure out, when would she have shown up? Would that be at the presidential gala at the beginning of the movie?
I have no clue, because apparently she was playing Rachel Leeton, who is also known as the superhero Diamondback, and her entire character arc was cut to one scene of her in the background. One scene in the background.
That's a Serpent Society member, and yeah, she was not there at all. So that must have been at the church then, when Giancarlo Esposito's character was telling them to like go and like meet them at the front or something.
The other thing is, I have a question. Ruth Bat-Saraf, is she actually sub 5 feet tall? Because that actress, I don't know if it's the way they framed some shots, but when she like enters rooms and walks behind chairs, her head is barely above them.
Yeah.
And then there's other moments where she's like talking to the president or talking to Sam, and all of a sudden she's within like chin height. I'm like,
she's in
you
eye
weren't that tall.
Yeah. As far as I know, that's a character I'm not familiar with in the comics. I believe she is a Black Widow, but
I am not mocking the actress at all. I'm just saying it just was it was just so they call it in movies the Scully box, because Dana Scully is so much smaller than Mulder, whatever Mulder's actual name.
Isn't it Fox Mulder?
Yeah. She's so much smaller. I haven't
even watched the X-Files. Come on, man.
I was thinking of his actual name. It's David something, isn't it?
David Duchovny.
Thank you, David Duchovny. And so what happened is, because they have such a difference, that anytime they were in frame together, they always have an Apple box for shorter actors to fix the eye line.
Mm-hmm. They did that with Natalie Portman too.
Yeah,
with she's Thor: Love and Thunder.
Yes, but she's so much shorter that they would give her 2, and they called it a Scully box because they ended up like nail gunning them together. So I noticed that when she would like walk in and they give her like the full profile, I'm like, okay. And then she'd walk near a chair and I'm like, you're quite short. And then she'd be like eyeline. I'm like, this isn't how this works. Because we get those famous shots. I know I've shown them to you before, of Robert Downey Jr. Whenever he's in a scene with like Chris Hemsworth or any of the Chris's, he's wearing stilettos.
He's like wearing elevated shoes. Yeah.
Massive platforms. So
he's out of line, but he's right.
I was just wondering if you noticed that, because it happens so often. Like she'd walk up to like the counter to go see Isaiah, and I'm like, huh. And then all of a sudden she's like kicking guys' ass and like flipping off walls and stuff, and I'm like, how tall are you? Because you're whooping some major ass, and I appreciate it. But why is your height so different in every single frame?
Yeah, I couldn't say. It's not a comic book character that I'm familiar with, and I know there is also some controversy surrounding the actress, as she is an Israeli soldier, and there's obviously that whole thing still going on with Gaza.
The character is an Israeli soldier.
I thought it was she was also Israeli.
That I don't know. I just remember the character is an Israeli soldier working for Mossad that is introduced in one of the Hulks. I don't know. I was just wondering if you know anything about like
another reason why this is very obviously a Hulk movie that they converted into a Captain America movie.
Right. I was just wondering if you know anything about like, is that character supposed to be like super powered or something? But the reason why I brought that up is the secondary thing is, does it feel like during the reshoots that their character arc was destroyed? Because it seemed very, very apparent that they were supposed to be a massive red herring as to a possible villain.
Yes. Yeah. The like you see them a few times before Isaiah gets mind controlled. And it's like, oh, this is going to be a bad person, because they hold on her for very long, uncomfortably long shots, because this is a person you've never seen before in any movie or in anything. And you're just like, who is this person? Why are we holding on them so long? I am uncomfortable now.
Yes. And so that's why I was like, tell me more. I'm interested.
Yeah, and they reveal really quickly that she's a reformed Black Widow, and that like probably Yelena and Natasha had helped in a Black Widow movie. But you got to get out of here soon. And I know there's one thing you really wanted to discuss. You sent me an article from Variety. It is 14 post-credit scene pileup, or Marvel's post-credit scene pileup, 14 cameos and storylines that haven't paid off, brackets yet.
So I want to add a 15th to that list. We won't really go through the list. It was just more, we have discussed how phases 4 and 5, the post-end credit scene lead to nothing, basically. But there is another cameo in this film that I want to discuss that I want to know, is it going to lead to anything? This is very important, Josh. I need your entire focus here. I have
turned off the tab. I'm looking at you through my screen.
Okay. Do you think Bucky wins his seat?
I love that scene, man.
Yeah, I did too.
When Bucky said, "I love you, bud," I got it. I felt it. I was like, he likes him. They're friends.
Yeah. They went from being in a car together.
Journey in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And I mean, they basically did a whole recap of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier in that one like 3-minute scene.
It was so good.
It was so good.
Oh, it was so good. Bucky and him, like, talking him up. And he's like, did your speechwriters write that? Just the end part. It worked, right? And then
80% B+.
Yeah. And then Ruth mentions like, he's great hair and posture. He's going to be a congressman soon. And was it Falcon says he's 110.
He's 110 years old. I can live with that.
So my question about that cameo is what district is he running for?
He'd be running for the Brooklyn district in New York.
Okay, so he's a House of Representatives. Got it. 2, who's going to hire a House of Representatives? Bucky. He's about to, in the next film, go kill a lot of people.
Yeah, that's a big. That's the other thing that Ricky really wanted to know. Like, she's like, well, we have to see Thunderbolts now, or I have to see Thunderbolts. And I'm like, I'm going to see it no matter what. But yeah, I mean, if you want to come with, but she's like, how does that tie into Thunderbolts? Because you've got Diane from Seinfeld having a whole congressional hearing, and then Bucky's recruiting in the trailer that we see. So like what is happening here that he's running a Black Ops team, super soldiers, essentially. Like they're not even superheroes. They're just super soldiers. And Yelena. And they're the ones that are going to take down a Superman style villain. Like, how does that work in any context?
One of the things I find funniest about that is, so that trailer for Thunderbolts, I think Yelena goes, so what? We're just going to punch and shoot things? And I'm like, okay, first off, the Red Guardian's a super soldier. Bucky's a super soldier.
Yeah, Ghost, they punch.
Yeah, Ghost is a quantum soldier.
She'll steal and punch.
Yeah,
but stealthily.
But if you break it down, other than, I mean, even Iron Man, the majority of what he does is punch people. Yeah, that's what you guys do, because shooting sky beams at people gets really boring really quick.
Awful person, but that's one of the reasons why Joss Whedon really wanted to bring in Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver into Age of Ultron, which again, Joss Whedon, horrible person, but because he was like, pretty much everyone we have on the team that's not Hawkeye is a punchy guy. And while that can be visually interesting, it's not interesting in terms of variety. So
yeah,
that's why we brought in Hawkeye, and that's why we brought in the speedy guy and the magic girl. It changes things up a little bit.
Yeah. So do you think that Bucky's cameo or the end thing leads anywhere? Because that article it's pretty dang accurate.
Well, I look at it from two lenses. One, all those post-credit scenes were done while Marvel was still like, oh, phase 4, like we're not even doing phases anymore. We've got like a 5-year plan for this first post-Endgame era of things leading up to Kang. And we've got Black Widow, which is coming out 6 years too late. We've got Shang-Chi, which why don't we have a sequel by now?
Dude, give us a sequel, man.
And there's so many things that they were clearly like, we're just going to do individual movies that will eventually come together, which is like how this started. Like the only connective tissue in those first 5 movies was Coulson. And then Robert Downey Jr. showed up in Incredible Hulk to kind of solidify like, oh shit, like this is a thing that's happening.
Yeah.
Like it's not a terrible way to do it, but because you've already broke the Avengers break in case of emergency case, what they needed to do, which I've said this time and time again, which if you have your bingo card or your drinking game going, get ready for a shot because Josh is saying it again. They needed to initiate a rebuild the Avengers thing with this new phase. Like you can do, you can't do Black Widow. I'm sorry. Even if you're setting up Yelena, Black Widow happened 6 years too late, 5 years too late. It was 2016. That movie should have come out in 2017 or 2018. You can't do it in 2020 or 2021, whenever that came out. What they needed to do is this movie needed to be second, third, or fourth in the release schedule. And Sam needed to be like, we need to rebuild the Avengers. Something is going to happen that we can't foresee. And we need an Avengers team. And then you can kind of keep doing what you're doing, but have Sam show up. Anthony Mackie is there. Like he is ready and willing to show up for these movies.
Yep.
And you can have him show up. And then you can also have Kamala Khan show up where she is ready and willing to create a young Avengers team. And you can have all these connective tissues and still do the thing while also doing the individual movies. And you had Wong doing that at the start of post-Endgame, where Wong was showing up in all these different things. But they were never building towards Avengers. They were building towards Kang. And then they were going to use Kang as like the Loki to be like, oh crap, we need a group of people to come together and do this thing. And that's not a terrible plan. But when you're not even giving anyone the breadcrumbs to put together to see that picture, you've lost the plot of what people are expecting from these movies and shows. Because as Matt points out every now and again too, there's a misconception with Marvel movies that you need to watch everything to understand it. You don't. You can, and you'll have a greater appreciation for it, but you don't need to have watched Black Widow, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Shang-Chi to watch Ant-Man Quantumania.
Right. And I think
not that you should.
I think that is also one of the failings of this movie is it starts off with the gala where there is a carrot dangled in front of Sam, which is, as you mentioned, hey, rebuild the Avengers with me. The end of the movie is Sam going with Ross now in prison in the raft, along with apparently Samuel Stearns, and the raft looks really small. So like they're next door neighbors or across from each other. Anyway, not important. But he goes,
well, we don't know how deep it goes. Maybe it's like an iceberg.
Yeah, that's true. And so he ends with Mackie going, yeah, maybe I can lead the Avengers. It's like, it just spun its wheels. Thunderbolts aren't going to be part of the Avengers, I'm assuming. We got Fantastic Four coming up. That's 3 movies this year. And the next year we got Doomsday. Is Doomsday going to be about building the Avengers? If so, that's another year. And now we're 7 years past Endgame. Where's Kamala Khan? As you said, it just feels weird that we don't really have a rogues gallery, not rogues gallery. We don't have a gallery of people to pull up into the Avengers unless you look at the Thunderbolts. Like, where the hell is Moon Knight? Moon Knight was fantastic. Oscar Isaac has said repeatedly, I want more Moon Knight. Throw him in there. You already introduced him. And not Scarab. It was a Scarab. She got her wings in that.
Yeah, I think they called her Scarab.
Yeah, I loved her in that. She was wonderful. That outfit they gave her with the wings is gorgeous. It is an iconic look that it would be great to see, to see Sam and Bucky and the new Falcon and Moon Knight and Scarab and a redeemed, heck, even throw a redeemed Red Guardian in there, and Kamala Khan and Captain Marvel still floating around out there. You can have 12 Avengers. Just link them, do something, man.
I mean, if anything, like you rebuild the team through the Young Avengers, like you make a Young Avengers movie, you have Kamala Khan, you have Kate Bishop, you have Cassie Lang, you have Spider-Man, who is a college age kid now. He's still young. Like, yeah, he's teamed up with the Avengers, but he could be that linking tissue that brings the two together. And then you get to Doomsday where they're overmatched. They've been like making do with what they have. And then all of a sudden they're overmatched. And here come the adults to help but the adults need the kids to help. And like you have a new Super Avengers team with the young and the old, and like the passing of the guard going that way. But now we're stuck with this rush to the finish line of Thunderbolts is not going to be setting up, at least from what we've seen in the trailers, it's not going to be setting up the Avengers in any real case, other than maybe like, again, maybe Sam's going to make a call, or not Sam, Bucky's going to make a call to Sam and be like, hey, we have some candidates or something. Like, but even then, your candidates are all a bunch of super soldiers. And then you have Fantastic Four, which is your final movie before Doomsday. And that is literally your setup to, like, you have to activate incursions. You have to activate Robert Downey Jr. as Doom. You have to just break everything to set up any hype for the next Avengers movie, because for the last 7 years, at that point, by the time we get to Doomsday, there's been no talk of any Avengers other than where are they? Like, who will be the next Avengers? And that's just been like the biggest missed opportunity for many of this. And moving this movie up to second, third in line post Endgame, where you have Sam as the focal point of rebuilding the Avengers, makes a lot of sense. And like I said, when we were talking about the post credits, you build intrigue by being like, oh, are we introducing mutants? Are we building towards the Avengers? Like, who are the others? Like, what is any of this? Is it the Brood? Like, you have a litany of Marvel Comics stuff that you can just be like, what is this? What could it be? And they just shit the bed with all of it because everything was about content at that point instead of building a story.
Yeah, I completely agree. Which, by the way, Tom Holland is almost 30, man.
Don't remind me. That dude was 18, or I think he was 16 when he got the casting call. And then like by the time they put him in the movie, or the movie released, he was like on the verge of becoming 18. Next
year, by the time, if we get that movie out, that Spider-Man movie, they film it this year, he will be 30 when it releases, which is going to start being really awkward if they're going to be like, 2 years later, he's in college. It's like, you can't keep doing that, man.
Yeah, they supposedly had a trilogy of trilogies planned, whereas 3 movies in high school, 3 movies in college, 3 movies post-college, and like that would be his arc plus however many Avengers movies he's in.
Yep.
And now it's like, once again, you kind of shat the bed by refocusing everything and doing 3 movies of, and now he's Spider-Man. But
he's
now he's Spider-Man.
He's Spider-Man again.
But now he's Spider-Man because he's learned his lesson.
That's going to be 5 years between that movie and No Way Home. Damn.
That's insane.
Yep.
You can't have that long of a gap between Spider-Man movies.
Nope.
All right, Alex. If you want to get in on the conversation, join our Discord, which Alex will tell you about now.
Our Discord link is in the description below. It is where we discuss things, is where we post stuff, because you know what? Social media is toxic. Our Discord is less toxic. So please join it. And always at Matt on the Discord. He loves it. He spends his days there. We're pretty sure his boss doesn't even know that he actually has been hired as our manager of our Discord.
And as Alex mentioned, don't forget to click the link in our episode description. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the like button, hit that subscribe button if you're enjoying the conversation or if you want to join in. But the easiest way to get in touch with us is through the Discord. You can also email us at tsmackpod@gmail.com. You can find us on all our social media platforms, Blue Sky, Instagram, Threads, Hive Social, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok, at Talking Smack Pod. Thank you to Leo Allen for our musical themes, and Retro L Studios for our Ricky avatar, Beppo for our original avatars. Thanks to Joey Fitz for doing our thumbnails. Please like, subscribe, rate, review on your podcatcher of choice. And most importantly, everyone, thanks so much for listening and take care. Alex, thank you also for being here. I should have said that first.
I don't get the hate for this movie. It was fun. Not everyone needs to be a banger. It can just be a solid triple, man. You know, a double, whatever.
It's Thor. It's Iron Man 2. Like, it's not as bad as, like I said, I don't think it's as good as the Marvels. I think the Marvels had more fun, but it's still fine. Like 6 out of 10, 2.5 out of 5, 2.5 out of 4, whatever rating you want to use.
Yep.
3 out of 5.
5 out of 7.
Oh, we forgot to say, I'm going to say must see. I think it's a must see.
Definitely must see. I enjoyed it. It's good. watch Star Trek.
He's out of line, but he's right.